In a small, quiet city, there was a young nurse named Mia who worked at a local hospital. Mia wasn't just any nurse. She had a kind heart and a deep sense of empathy. She believed that being a nurse wasn't just about taking care of people physically, but emotionally as well. She had a natural ability to comfort patients and make them feel safe, something that didn't go unnoticed by her colleagues. She had always dreamed of making a difference in the world, and she felt she was doing just that every single day at the hospital. One morning, Mia's usual shift began like any other. She arrived early, ready to face the day's challenges. The hospital was always busy, with patients constantly being admitted and discharged. But today there was something different. A new patient had arrived, and she was assigned to take care of him. His name was Thomas, and he had been admitted due to severe kidney failure. Mia had worked with patients before who had kidney problems, but this case was different. Thomas was in his late 40s, and his condition seemed to be deteriorating quickly. He looked tired, his face drawn with exhaustion. He was hooked up to several machines, each one monitoring his vital signs. The doctors had told Mia that he was in urgent need of a kidney transplant. Without one, his chances of survival were slim. Mia was immediately struck by the severity of his situation. She knew that kidney transplants were complex surgeries, and that finding a match could take a long time. Thomas, despite his obvious discomfort, was quiet. He didn't speak much and seemed to withdraw into himself, avoiding eye contact with anyone. It was clear to Mia that he wasn't just physically ill, but emotionally distant as well. As the days passed, Mia took care of Thomas with the same dedication she gave to all her patients. She would check his vitals, administer his medications, and offer comforting words when he needed them. But despite her efforts, Thomas barely spoke. He never asked questions or showed much emotion. He simply lay in bed, staring at the ceiling or out the window as if lost in his own world. One evening, as Mia was finishing her shift, she found herself sitting next to Thomas's bed, reading his chart. She noticed something that caught her attention. Thomas was incredibly isolated. His medical records listed only a few distant family members and no close friends. In fact, the only contact he had was through his work, which seemed to be demanding and all-consuming. Thomas, as she learned, was a businessman, a CEO of a large company, but from what she gathered, he hadn't spoken to his family in years. His success had come at the cost of his personal life. Mia wondered how someone could become so detached from everything. How could success and wealth lead to such loneliness? She knew that the world often painted wealthy people as living perfect lives, full of luxury and happiness, but the reality, she realized, could be quite different. The more she thought about it, the more she realized that Thomas's physical condition wasn't the only thing that needed healing. He was emotionally worn out too, trapped in a life that had no room for genuine connections. Despite this, Mia kept doing what she did best. She made sure he was as comfortable as possible and did her best to keep him informed about his treatment. She would explain the kidney transplant process to him, though he often seemed uninterested. The doctors had told her that the transplant list was long, and it might take a while before a donor could be found. But Mia couldn't help but feel a sense of urgency. She knew that time was running out for Thomas, and the longer he waited, the weaker he became. One day, as she was preparing to leave for the evening, she received a call from the transplant coordinator. The news wasn't what she had hoped for. Thomas's situation had become even more critical. His kidneys were no longer functioning, and the doctors feared that without a transplant he wouldn't survive much longer. Mia felt a deep sense of sadness for him. She knew there was little she could do, except continue to provide care, but as she stood there holding the phone in her hand, she felt something else. A sense of responsibility. She had always been someone who wanted to help, but now more than ever, she felt that she couldn't just stand by and watch Thomas suffer. That night, as she lay in bed, Mia couldn't shake the thought of Thomas's condition. She thought about how he had spent his life working so hard to build an empire, only to find himself alone and sick. She thought about the patients she had cared for who had families, people who loved them, supported them. And then there was Thomas, isolated and alone. The thought of someone so lonely touched her heart deeply. The next morning, Mia was determined to make a difference. She knew that the hospital had an organ donation program, and she had heard of living donors before, people who donated kidneys to help save others. At first, the idea of donating a kidney seemed impossible. But as she thought about it more, she realized that if she could help save Thomas's life, it would be the most meaningful thing she could do. Mia wasn't sure what to expect. She had never considered being a living donor before, and she certainly hadn't expected to become one for a patient she barely knew, but something inside her told her that this was the right thing to do. It wasn't about the money or fame, it was about saving a life, giving someone the chance to live when they otherwise wouldn't. She knew that her decision would come with risks, but it felt like the right thing to do. She approached the transplant coordinator the next day, expressing her interest in donating a kidney to Thomas. The coordinator was surprised but supportive. Mia underwent a series of tests to determine if she was a match. There were several factors to consider: blood type, tissue compatibility, and overall health. The process was lengthy and complex, but Mia didn't hesitate. She was determined to help Thomas no matter what it took. As the tests came back, it became clear that Mia was a perfect match for Thomas. It was a rare and fortunate turn of events. The doctors explained that the transplant could take place soon, but there were risks involved. While the procedure was relatively common, it wasn't without its challenges. Mia knew this, but she was resolute. She had made up her mind. She called Thomas's room to inform him of the news, though she wasn't sure how he would react. She explained to him that she was a match, and that she was willing to donate her kidney to save his life. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and Mia began to wonder if he would refuse. But then Thomas's voice came through, quiet but grateful. "Thank you," he said, his words barely audible. "I don't know what to say." Mia smiled softly, feeling a warmth spread through her. She hadn't expected any grand gestures or outpouring of gratitude. In fact, she hadn't expected much from Thomas at all, but hearing his simple thank you meant more than anything. It was a sign that he wasn't entirely lost, that there was still a part of him capable of feeling. The surgery was scheduled for the following week. Mia went through the usual preparations, meeting with the doctors, signing forms, and ensuring that her health was in good condition. She wasn't scared. She felt an overwhelming sense of purpose. Her decision to donate her kidney wasn't about seeking attention or praise. It was simply the right thing to do. As the day of the surgery drew closer, Mia couldn't help but think about what would come next. She knew that Thomas's recovery would be a long and difficult process, and she would be there to support him every step of the way. But she also realized that she didn't know much about him as a person. All she knew was that he was a successful CEO, a man who had built his life around work, but who now faced the ultimate test of survival. She wondered what would happen after the transplant. Would Thomas's health improve? Would he open up to her? Mia wasn't sure, but she knew that this was only the beginning of something bigger. She had already changed his life by offering him a second chance, and she hoped that it would change hers as well. Mia was about to embark on a journey she never expected. She didn't know how it would unfold, but she was determined to do everything in her power to help Thomas survive. She had no idea that this simple act of kindness would lead her to a path that would change both of their lives forever. The day of the surgery arrived faster than Mia had expected. She had prepared herself mentally and physically, though the reality of what she was about to do felt overwhelming. As she lay on the hospital bed, preparing for the procedure, she couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. There was a sense of calm that came with knowing she had made the right decision, but there was also a tinge of nervousness. It wasn't easy to donate an organ, and she had no idea how her own recovery would unfold. The hospital staff were professional and reassuring, doing everything they could to ease her anxiety. Mia appreciated their kindness, but part of her was still focused on the life she was about to save. She thought about Thomas, about how different his life could be if the surgery was successful. He had no idea what she was doing for him, but she hoped that he would understand someday. As the anesthetic began to take effect, Mia felt herself drifting into unconsciousness. She knew that the next few hours would be critical, both for her and for Thomas. She had faith in the doctors and in the process, but the reality of what was happening, giving a piece of herself to another person, was profound. The thought echoed in her mind as she slipped into sleep. This is for him. This is for someone who needs this second chance. When she woke up, the first thing she felt was a dull ache in her abdomen. The pain was expected, though it still caught her off guard. It was sharp but not unbearable. Mia tried to shift her position, but the bandages around her stomach reminded her of the seriousness of what she had just done. She looked around the room, groggy and disoriented. It was clear that the surgery had been successful, but how successful she didn't know yet. The first few hours after waking up were a blur. Nurses came in to check her vitals, administer pain medication, and monitor her recovery. Mia felt drained but also strangely content. She couldn't quite explain it, but there was a quiet satisfaction in knowing that she had given something so important to someone in need. She had taken a risk, and now she just needed to heal. Thomas's surgery had also taken place around the same time, but she hadn't been able to see him before the procedure. She knew that his recovery would be more complex given his age and condition, but she remained hopeful. If everything went well, he would have a chance to live the life he had almost lost. Mia had no idea what he was thinking or how he was feeling, but she couldn't help but feel a connection to him, now that they had both been through something so significant together. The following day, Mia was able to sit up in bed, though the discomfort was still present. She tried to walk around, but her body protested and she found herself sitting back down quickly. The doctor came by to check on her, his face softening when he saw that she was alert and responsive. He told her that the surgery had gone as expected, and the kidney was already showing signs of proper function in Thomas's body. It was all good news, but Mia didn't feel quite ready to celebrate yet. Later that afternoon, a nurse came into Mia's room with a message. Thomas had asked to see her. Mia felt a little surprised, but she was also touched. She had never expected any kind of recognition for her act. She hadn't done it for that reason, but now, as the nurse wheeled her to Thomas's room, she couldn't help but wonder what he would say. When they entered his room, Mia was struck by how much healthier he looked. He still looked a bit pale, but his eyes were brighter, and his demeanor seemed more at ease. His normally stern face had softened, and there was something about the way he smiled when he saw her that made her heart swell. It wasn't an extravagant show of gratitude, but rather a quiet acknowledgement, a recognition of what she had done for him. "Mia," Thomas said, his voice weak but steady. "I don't know how to thank you. What you did, it's more than I could ever ask for." Mia smiled, though she felt her own emotions stir inside. "You don't have to thank me," she replied gently. "I just wanted to help." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The room was filled with an awkward silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that spoke volumes, a silence that said there was more to this than just a medical procedure. Thomas was trying to process the enormity of what had just happened, and Mia was doing the same. They had both been through something life-changing, but neither of them knew how it would affect their lives going forward. After a few minutes, Thomas spoke again. "I can't believe you did this. I've never had someone do something like this for me. I've spent my whole life building my company, but I've neglected everything else. I've always been alone, and now here you are giving me this gift." Mia listened carefully, sensing the depth of his words. She could see that Thomas was struggling, trying to reconcile his achievements with the reality of his loneliness. He had spent so much time focusing on his business, isolating himself from the world, that he had lost sight of what truly mattered. Mia could see that now in the quiet moments of recovery. He was beginning to understand the value of what he had been given, not just the kidney, but the chance to live. "You don't have to be alone," Mia said, her voice calm and reassuring. "It's never too late to change things." Thomas looked at her, his gaze softening. "I don't know if I know how to change things. I've built walls around myself for so long. I'm not sure where to start." Mia nodded. She understood that change wasn't easy, especially after years of living in isolation, but she also knew that the first step was always the hardest. Thomas had already taken that step by allowing someone else into his life, by accepting her gift. That, she thought, was a start. The conversation shifted to lighter topics, and Mia stayed with Thomas for a while longer. She didn't know how much longer she could stay, but she wanted to be there for him, to offer a sense of comfort during his recovery. It wasn't just about the physical healing. It was about the emotional healing, too. Thomas needed time, and Mia understood that. She had been there herself, learning to balance her own life and work, trying to find meaning beyond her responsibilities as a nurse. As Mia left Thomas's room later that afternoon, she couldn't help but reflect on the situation. She had donated her kidney to a man she barely knew, a man who was wealthy, powerful, and yet incredibly lonely. She had helped him, but in many ways she was beginning to realize that this was not just about saving his life. It was about opening both of their lives to new possibilities. They were strangers who had connected in a way that neither of them had expected, and that connection would change them both forever. Over the next few days, Mia's recovery continued slowly. She had the support of her colleagues and her family, but she still found herself thinking about Thomas. She wondered how he was doing, if he was truly beginning to open up, if he was feeling better both physically and emotionally. She knew that healing took time, but she hoped that in his own way Thomas would start to heal the wounds that had been with him for years. Meanwhile, Thomas was adjusting to his new reality. He was grateful, yes, but there was still a part of him that struggled with the emotional toll of what had happened. Mia's gift had given him a second chance at life, but he knew that the real challenge would be learning how to live that life differently, learning how to reconnect with the world he had shut out for so long. Their journey had only just begun, and neither of them knew what the future would hold. But they both knew that they had made a profound impact on each other's lives, and that the bond they shared would be something neither of them would ever forget. Days turned into weeks, and Mia found herself adjusting to life after the surgery. Her body was healing, but there were moments when the discomfort reminded her of the huge decision she had made. The pain was mostly gone now, but there were still times when she felt exhausted or a little off balance. It wasn't easy, but she had no regrets. The thought of Thomas's recovery gave her the strength to keep moving forward. Mia continued her work at the hospital, focusing on her patients and her responsibilities. She enjoyed the routine, and the familiarity of her daily tasks provided a sense of comfort. But she couldn't deny that her mind often wandered back to Thomas. She wondered how he was doing, how he was coping with the changes in his life. She hadn't seen him much after the surgery, but she had received a few updates from the doctors. He was recovering well, but the emotional aspect of his journey was something they hadn't fully addressed yet. It wasn't until one afternoon, several weeks after the surgery, that Mia received a call from Thomas. She had just finished her shift and was getting ready to head home when the phone rang. She hesitated for a moment, surprised that he was calling her. They hadn't spoken much since that day in his hospital room. He had sent a thank you card, but it had been a simple gesture, and she didn't expect much more from him. He had his own life to live, and she was just the person who had helped him survive. "Mia," Thomas said when she picked up the phone, his voice calm but warm. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything." Mia smiled, feeling a sense of relief at hearing his voice. "No, not at all. How are you feeling?" "I'm getting better," Thomas replied, sounding more relaxed than she had heard him before. "It's been a strange few weeks, but I wanted to call and check in with you. I feel like I haven't really expressed how much I appreciate what you did for me." Mia's heart warmed. "You don't have to thank me," she said softly. "I was happy to help." Thomas paused for a moment before responding. "I know, but I want you to understand that it's more than just the kidney. You gave me a second chance at life, and that's something I can't take lightly. I don't know how to fully express it, but I wanted you to know that I don't take this gift for granted." Mia was quiet for a moment, touched by his words. She hadn't expected him to open up like this, and it meant more to her than she could put into words. "I'm just glad you're doing well," she said, keeping her tone simple but sincere. "It's the least I could do." "I know," Thomas replied. "But it's not just the physical part. I've been thinking a lot about everything in my life, about what I've been doing all these years. I've spent so much time focused on work and success that I lost sight of what really matters. I've neglected relationships, and I've isolated myself from people who care. Your kindness has forced me to confront that. I don't know what to do with it, but I want to try." Mia listened carefully, sensing the weight of his words. She had always known that Thomas's loneliness went beyond his physical health, but hearing him admit it was something else entirely. "It's never too late to make changes," she said softly. "It's a process, but it's worth it." Thomas let out a deep breath. "I'm not sure where to start, but I'd like to. I've already made one change. I've started reaching out to some of the people in my life. I called my sister last week after years of not talking to her. It wasn't easy, but it felt right." Mia smiled. It was a small step, but it was a big one for Thomas. She knew that reconnecting with people would take time, but hearing that he had taken that first step gave her hope. "That's great," she said. "It's a start, and that's all you can ask for." Thomas was quiet for a moment before speaking again. I don't know where this is going, but I feel like I owe you more than just a thank you. You've made me realize that I need to change my life, and I want to do that. I don't know what that means for us, but I just wanted to be honest with you." Mia was taken aback by his honesty. She hadn't expected him to open up so much, but it made her realize how much he was grappling with. He wasn't just thanking her for saving his life. He was processing the deeper implications of that act. She wasn't sure what to say, but she felt a sense of connection to him. More than just a patient and nurse, she realized that in giving him her kidney, she had unknowingly given him the chance to change, to start fresh. "You don't owe me anything," Mia said, her voice soft. "I did what felt right. You don't need to make any promises to me. You just need to take things one step at a time." "I know," Thomas replied, "but I want to keep in touch. I want to continue this journey, whatever it looks like. I've been so caught up in my own world, but I don't want to keep living like that. You've shown me that there's more to life than just work and money." Mia's heart felt full. She hadn't expected such an open conversation, and she realized how much she had underestimated Thomas. He had been so focused on his career, on building his empire, that he had never allowed himself to truly experience the world around him. Now, after the surgery, he was beginning to see the value of human connection. It was a slow process, but it was a start. "Okay," Mia said finally, "we can keep in touch. But don't put pressure on yourself. Just take things day by day." Thomas chuckled softly. "I can do that. Thank you, Mia. Really, for everything." The call ended soon after, and Mia stood by the window looking out at the city below. She felt a sense of peace, knowing that she had helped Thomas in more ways than she had originally realized. She had given him a second chance, but in doing so, she had also given him the opportunity to rediscover what truly mattered. Over the next few weeks, Thomas and Mia stayed in touch. They didn't speak every day, but there was a steady communication between them. Thomas reached out to her whenever he had questions or wanted to talk. He even invited her to lunch once, a gesture that took her by surprise. It wasn't an extravagant lunch, just a quiet meal at a small cafe, but it felt like a step toward something more. They talked about everything and nothing, getting to know each other in a way they hadn't before. Thomas was still cautious, still figuring out how to navigate this new part of his life, but Mia was patient. She knew that change took time. Thomas's recovery continued, both physically and emotionally. He started spending more time with family, reconnecting with people he had lost touch with. It wasn't easy for him, and there were moments when he doubted himself, but Mia's support kept him going. She never pushed him, never made him feel like he had to be someone he wasn't. She was simply there, a steady presence in his life, and that made all the difference. As the months went by, their relationship evolved. They grew closer, but it wasn't something either of them rushed into. They both understood that there was no need for immediate answers, no pressure to define their connection. What mattered was that they had found something in each other, a sense of understanding, of shared experiences. They had both been through something life-changing, and that bond was something they couldn't ignore. For Thomas, Mia was a reminder that there was more to life than just achievements and success. She had shown him the value of human connection, of kindness, and of selflessness. For Mia, Thomas was a reminder that even the most successful people had their own struggles, their own vulnerabilities. She had never expected to be part of his journey in such a meaningful way, but she was grateful for it. She had helped him survive, and in doing so, she had helped him find a new path, a path that was about more than just survival. It was about living fully, about embracing the people and experiences that made life worth living. Their connection wasn't about grand gestures or promises. It was about two people who had met in an unexpected way and found something real in each other. It was about healing, growth, and the quiet power of kindness. Several months had passed since the surgery, and both Mia and Thomas had changed in ways they never expected. Mia had returned to her usual routine at the hospital, her body fully recovered from the donation. But she felt different. It wasn't just the physical act of giving away a part of herself. It was the emotional journey she had gone on since meeting Thomas. She had witnessed firsthand the incredible impact of her decision to donate, not only on his health but on his outlook on life. Thomas, for his part, had continued his recovery with determination. He had made an effort to reconnect with his family, his friends, and even the colleagues he had neglected over the years. He wasn't the same man who had been lying in that hospital bed, isolated and withdrawn. He was more open, more vulnerable, and much more aware of the things that truly mattered. He still had a long way to go, but the progress he had made was undeniable. Mia had seen Thomas change, but he had also seen her in a new light. They were no longer just nurse and patient. Their relationship had evolved into something more complicated yet deeply meaningful. They had grown to trust each other, to lean on one another, and, without either of them fully realizing it, they had begun to care for each other in ways that went beyond mere friendship. It started with the small things, the messages, the phone calls. They began talking more often, sometimes about the big changes in Thomas's life, sometimes about the mundane. He'd ask her advice on everything from business decisions to relationships. He'd tell her about his newfound attempts at making time for things outside of work, like taking weekend trips to visit old friends or going on walks in the park. He'd even laugh about how strange it felt to be out of the office and engaged in things that had nothing to do with profits or deadlines. For Thomas, this was a whole new world, and he was eager to explore it. Mia would listen intently, offering encouragement and sometimes teasing him about how out of place he seemed when he tried to enjoy simple pleasures. She would joke that he needed to stop being such a workaholic and start living. She knew he had a lot of growing to do, but she believed in him. There was a raw honesty in their conversations that made both of them feel understood, and that was something neither of them had experienced in a long time. Over time, their communication became more personal. Mia had always been the kind of person who kept a healthy distance from her patients. Her professional nature didn't allow her to get too emotionally involved. But with Thomas, it was different. He wasn't just a patient anymore. He was someone who had opened up to her in ways no one else had, and she, in turn, began to reveal parts of herself she hadn't shared with others. One evening, after a long day at the hospital, Mia received a text from Thomas. He asked if she would be interested in joining him for dinner the following weekend. He wanted to thank her in person, and more than that, he wanted to continue their conversations. They had both been so focused on their personal healing that they hadn't taken the time to really connect outside of the hospital setting. At first, Mia hesitated. She had become close to Thomas, but she wasn't sure if she was ready to cross the line between patient and friend, or something more. She wasn't used to mixing personal feelings with her professional life, and she didn't want to complicate things. But as she stared at the message, she realized something. She had already crossed that line. She had already given a part of herself to Thomas, and in doing so, she had opened her heart to a new possibility, so she agreed to meet him. When the day came, Mia was nervous, but she pushed the feeling aside. She chose a simple dress, not too fancy but still comfortable, and headed to the restaurant where they had agreed to meet. The place was cozy, tucked away in a quiet corner of the city, and had a calm ambiance. As she entered, she spotted Thomas immediately. He was sitting at a corner table, looking more relaxed than she had ever seen him. He stood up as she approached, offering a warm smile. "Hey," he said, his voice soft but genuine. "I'm really glad you could make it." Mia smiled back, feeling a wave of relief. "Of course. I wouldn't miss it." They sat down, and for the first few minutes they talked about everything. What had been happening in their lives, how things had changed since the surgery. It was easy to talk to him. He was no longer the isolated CEO who was consumed with his work. He was someone who was learning to open up, to live a fuller life. And Mia found herself enjoying the conversation more than she had anticipated. The dinner passed in a blur of laughter and shared stories. They spoke about everything except the unspoken tension that lingered between them. Mia couldn't deny that there was something more between them, something that was growing deeper with each passing day. And though she didn't know what it was exactly, she knew it was real. At the end of the evening, Thomas walked Mia to her car. They stood by the door for a moment, neither of them quite ready to say goodbye. There was a quiet understanding between them, a silent acknowledgement of the connection that had been building. "I really enjoyed tonight," Thomas said, his voice sincere. "I'm glad we did this." "Me too," Mia replied, her heart feeling lighter than it had in weeks. "Maybe we should do it again sometime." He smiled, his eyes warm. "I'd like that." As Mia drove home, she thought about the evening. It had been simple, but it had meant a lot. There was something new between her and Thomas, something unspoken but undeniable. She wasn't sure where it would lead, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was open to the possibility of whatever came next. Over the next few weeks, their dinners became a regular occurrence. They began to meet more frequently, sometimes for lunch, sometimes for walks in the park. They shared more of their lives with each other, hopes, dreams, fears. Thomas continued to work on his personal growth, making an effort to balance his career with his relationships. He made time for his family, for his friends, and most importantly, for himself. He had learned that success was not just about what he achieved in business, but about the connections he made along the way. Mia, too, began to open up in ways she hadn't before. She shared more of her past with Thomas, how she had always wanted to help others, how being a nurse was more than just a job to her. She had grown up in a family that valued kindness and empathy, and it was these values that had driven her to become a nurse. But she also admitted that she had been cautious when it came to relationships. She had always kept her emotions at arm's length, never wanting to get too close to anyone. But with Thomas, she felt something different. She felt a warmth that she hadn't experienced before. As their bond deepened, they both realized that they were no longer just two people connected by a single act of kindness. They were two individuals who had found something in each other that they hadn't expected. A sense of understanding, a sense of home. One evening, after a long walk through the city, they stopped at a bench by the river. The sun had just set, casting a warm glow over the water. Thomas turned to Mia, his expression serious but soft. "Mia," he began, his voice low, "I've been thinking a lot about what you've done for me. I'll never be able to repay you for giving me this second chance, but I want you to know that I'm grateful. Not just for the kidney, but for everything you've done since then. You've changed my life." Mia felt her heart flutter. She had known that Thomas was grateful, but hearing him say it so openly made it feel more real. "You've changed your life too," she replied. "You've made changes I never thought I'd see. And that's something to be proud of." Thomas smiled, but there was a seriousness in his eyes. "I know we've both been through a lot. And I don't know what the future holds, but I want to be part of your life. I want to keep learning, growing, and being with you, however that looks." Mia's heart skipped a beat. She had been afraid to admit it to herself, but now, hearing Thomas speak so openly, she realized that she felt the same way. She had come to care for him deeply, more than she had ever imagined possible. "I'd like that too," she said softly, her voice steady. "I think we're both on a journey, and I want to be part of yours." As they sat there side by side with the river flowing gently before them, they both knew that this was just the beginning. They didn't know what the future would bring, but they were no longer afraid to embrace it together. The months that followed brought even more change for both Mia and Thomas. As their relationship deepened, they learned to balance their personal lives with their individual growth. They were no longer just a nurse and a patient. They were two people, learning to navigate life together after the profound experience that had connected them. Thomas had made great strides in reshaping his life. His once all-consuming career no longer ruled his world. He had learned to delegate, to step back, and to focus on what mattered most: his health, his relationships, and his personal happiness. The walls he had built around himself over the years were slowly coming down, and he was finding a new sense of freedom, both physically and emotionally. Mia, too, had grown from her experience. She had always been a caregiver, always willing to give of herself to others, but she had never truly allowed herself to rely on anyone. She had always kept her emotions at arm's length, knowing the risks of getting too close to anyone. But with Thomas, things were different. She found herself opening up, trusting him in ways she hadn't trusted anyone before. Their connection was built on more than just the shared experience of the surgery. It was a bond that had formed naturally, rooted in the kindness, empathy, and vulnerability they both shared. Their relationship continued to develop slowly but steadily. They found joy in the small moments: late-night conversations, walks in the park, quiet dinners at home. They didn't rush things, but there was an undeniable sense of companionship that grew between them. They had both been through difficult times, but together, they had learned to cherish the present and focus on what really mattered. One evening, after spending the day together, they sat in the small park near Thomas's apartment watching the sunset. It had become their place. Peaceful, quiet, a little sanctuary where they could just be themselves without the pressures of the outside world. The air was cool, and the city buzzed softly in the background, but in that moment it felt like time had slowed down. "I've been thinking about something," Thomas said, breaking the silence. His voice was calm, but there was a seriousness to it that Mia immediately noticed. Mia turned to him, her curiosity piqued. "What's on your mind?" Thomas took a deep breath as if gathering his thoughts. "I've been thinking about how far I've come since the surgery, how much I've changed, and how much of that change is because of you. You saved my life, yes, but you've also made me realize that I've been living my life all wrong. I've been focused on the wrong things, and it's cost me. But now I want to do things differently. I want to build something real, something that isn't just about business, but about connection, about living with purpose." Mia smiled, her heart swelling with pride. She had watched Thomas grow over the past few months, and hearing him say these words felt like confirmation that everything they had been through had been worth it. "I'm really proud of you," Mia said softly. "It's not easy to make those kinds of changes, especially after so many years of living one way. But you've done it. And you're not just doing it for yourself. You're doing it for the people around you, too. For those who care about you." Thomas nodded, his gaze meeting hers. "And that's where you come in." Mia felt a flutter in her chest, not from fear, but from the weight of what he was saying. "What do you mean?" He hesitated for a moment, his eyes softening. "I've been thinking about us, about what we've built together. And I realized that I don't want to let that go. I don't want to keep my distance from you anymore. I've spent too much of my life pushing people away, and I'm not going to do that with you. I want to be with you, Mia. I want to see where this can go." Mia felt a warmth spread through her. She had known for a while that her feelings for Thomas had evolved, but hearing him express his feelings so openly took her by surprise. She had always been cautious, unsure of how to navigate these kinds of emotions, but in this moment it felt like everything was falling into place. "I want that too," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been afraid to admit it to myself, but I know now that I don't want to let this go either. I care about you, Thomas, more than I ever thought I would." The words hung in the air for a moment, and then, without thinking, Thomas reached out and took her hand. It was a simple gesture, but it felt profound. As their fingers intertwined, Mia realized that this was it, the moment where everything changed. They didn't need to rush into anything. They didn't need to define what this was right away. All that mattered was that they had found each other, and they were willing to take the next step together, whatever that might look like. Over the next few weeks, their bond continued to grow. They spent more time together, navigating the ups and downs of life, but always with each other by their side. Thomas continued to work on his personal development, taking the time to focus on the things that mattered most to him. He spent more time with his family, reconnected with old friends, and started giving back to his community. But the most significant change was in his relationship with Mia. He no longer saw her as just the nurse who saved his life. She was now his partner in every sense of the word. Mia, for her part, embraced this new chapter with open arms. She had always been self-sufficient, always relied on herself, but with Thomas she found that she could let her guard down. She could share her thoughts, her dreams, and her fears, knowing that he would listen without judgment. For the first time, she didn't feel like she had to be strong all the time. She could be vulnerable, and that was something she had never allowed herself to do before. Their relationship wasn't perfect, but it was real. They had both been through difficult times, and they knew that they would face challenges ahead. But they also knew that they had something worth fighting for, something that was built on trust, understanding, and mutual respect. As the months passed, they continued to grow closer. They talked about their future, about the things they wanted to do together. They dreamed of traveling, of building a life that wasn't defined by work or success, but by the people they loved and the experiences they shared. It wasn't about grand gestures or big plans. It was about the little moments, the quiet conversations, the shared laughter, the way they supported each other through life's ups and downs. One evening, as they sat on the couch in Thomas's apartment, Mia leaned her head on his shoulder. It was a simple moment, but in that moment everything felt right. She looked up at him, her heart full of warmth, and said, "I'm glad we found each other." Thomas smiled, his eyes soft. "Me too. It wasn't just about the surgery anymore. It wasn't just about the life-saving decision that had brought them together. It was about the life they were building now, together. A life that was rooted in love, trust, and the understanding that they had both been given a second chance, not just at life but at happiness. And as they sat there, side by side, watching the world outside, they knew that whatever the future held, they would face it together. Mia and Thomas had come so far, and yet, life always had its way of challenging people to grow even more. Though the road they had walked together had been filled with moments of joy, growth, and mutual understanding, they knew that the real test of their connection was just beginning. It had been over a year since Mia's donation, and their relationship had deepened into something solid. But while their love for each other was strong, life had a way of bringing new obstacles into the picture. Thomas was still the ambitious businessman who had once been consumed by his company, and despite his promises to find balance, there were moments when his old habits crept back in. He still worked long hours, and Mia noticed the strain it was beginning to put on their relationship. One morning, as the sun crept through the window of their apartment, Mia woke up earlier than usual. She lay there staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. She had been thinking about Thomas, about how much he had changed, but also about how he still struggled with the same pressures he had before. She knew how hard he was trying to find balance. But the truth was that he still hadn't quite learned how to let go of the world he had once built his entire identity around. As she heard Thomas's footsteps in the kitchen, she felt a knot form in her stomach. The last few days had been tense between them. He had been distant, wrapped up in business meetings and phone calls, barely making time for the quiet moments they had once shared. Mia knew that his drive was part of who he was, but she also feared that he was losing sight of the things that really mattered, the things they had worked so hard to rebuild together. Later that evening, they sat down for dinner. It was a quiet affair, something they had done many times before, but tonight felt different. The air was thick with unspoken words, and Mia could feel the weight of the silence between them. She knew that they needed to talk, but she wasn't sure where to begin. Thomas set his fork down and looked at her. His face was drawn, his eyes tired. "Mia, we need to talk," he said, his voice low. Mia nodded. She had been waiting for this moment. "I've been feeling like we've been drifting apart lately," she said carefully. "You've been so busy, and I feel like you're not really here anymore. I get it. Work is important to you, but we need to find a way to make this work too. We've come so far, but I'm worried that if we don't address this now, we'll lose what we've built." Thomas's expression softened. He let out a deep breath, clearly burdened by his own thoughts. "I know," he said quietly. "I've been caught up in work again. It's like a habit I can't break. But I don't want to lose you, Mia. You mean everything to me." "I know you don't want that," she replied, her voice gentle but firm. "But I can't keep putting my life on hold while you're so focused on your company. I need to feel like I'm a priority in your life too." Thomas reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "I hear you, Mia. I've been blind to how much I've been neglecting our relationship. I thought I was doing the right thing by working hard, but I've realized that I'm sacrificing the very thing that matters most to me." Mia squeezed his hand. "I know you're trying, but trying isn't enough. We need to make real changes. I need you to be here, fully present, and I need to feel like we're building something together, not just surviving." Thomas nodded, his gaze steady. "You're right. I've been putting too much focus on my career, thinking that success would fill the void, but it hasn't. It's only made me feel more isolated. I want to build a life with you, Mia, not just a future where we're both doing our own things, but one where we share everything." That night, after a long conversation, Mia and Thomas made a pact. They would prioritize each other. They agreed to set boundaries when it came to work and to carve out time for each other, no matter how busy life became. It wasn't going to be easy, but they both knew that if they wanted their relationship to last, they needed to find a way to make it work together. In the weeks that followed, things didn't magically get better overnight, but they slowly began to find their rhythm. Thomas made a conscious effort to stop working late into the night. He started scheduling regular date nights with Mia, something simple like cooking dinner together or going for walks. They rediscovered the small things that had first brought them together: the laughter, the ease of being with someone who truly understood you, and the joy of simply being present in the moment. Mia, too, began to adjust. She had always been the one to put others first, and she had sometimes forgotten to take care of herself. Now she made more time for the things that brought her peace: whether it was reading, taking long walks, or enjoying quiet evenings in. She found that by taking care of herself, she was better able to give to her relationship with Thomas. One afternoon, months later, they found themselves sitting in the park again, just like old times. The world around them seemed to fade away as they talked, laughed, and enjoyed each other's company. Mia felt a sense of contentment that had been missing in the earlier days of their relationship. It was a slow burn, but they were finally building a life that was grounded in the things that truly mattered: love, presence, and mutual respect. "I'm proud of us," Mia said, resting her head on Thomas's shoulder. "I know it hasn't been easy, but we're here and we're stronger for it." Thomas smiled, his arm around her. "We've been through a lot, but we've come out the other side. I don't want to take any of this for granted." Their relationship had been forged in unexpected circumstances, but it was stronger than either of them had ever imagined. It had taught them both valuable lessons about love, sacrifice, and the importance of being present. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and they both knew that was enough. As they walked away from the park, hand in hand, Mia realized that life was never going to be a straight path. There would always be obstacles, always be moments when they would have to work harder than before, but as long as they faced those challenges together, there was nothing they couldn't overcome. For the first time in a long time, Mia felt hopeful for the future. She had given a part of herself to save a life, and in doing so, she had unknowingly created a new one for herself, filled with love and possibility. Together, they were writing the next chapter of their story, and this time they would face whatever came their way. Together.